This right here is the Google Pixel 3a, and there's something special about this phone. This is the only phone that is listed to be 100% compatible with Ubuntu Touch, arguably the very best and most feature-rich Linux mobile operating system available today. And when I say everything works, I mean it says just about everything. They actually have a very nice page here to list out a bunch of different phones that are supported and all the things that should and shouldn't work with them. And when it comes to all the hardware features on this, everything does have a green check, and that includes the camera, the Bluetooth, sending and receiving picture messages, the fingerprint reader here on the back, the flashlight, really just about everything. And I have been using this as my primary cell phone for just over 2 weeks. So this video is going to be reporting to you guys on, is actually using a Linux mobile device feasible today? And is this phone that is supposedly 100% really 100%? So before we dive into my actual experience using this thing, we need to talk about the actual specifications and Ubuntu Touch itself. Now, don't let the price of this thing fool you. This is the perfect example of why you really don't need to spend $1,200 to get a decent cell phone. It features a Snapdragon 670, a 1080p by 2160 display. It's made of polycarbonate instead of plastic, or fragile glass like we see on a lot of the really expensive smartphones. Like we saw, the fingerprint reader here is almost perfect placement. I still wish they were right there. 3700 milliamp battery, and paired with the specifications of this phone, you easily can get a full day, and that is also true with Ubuntu Touch on this phone. Overall, this phone was extremely well received when it was released back in 2019, and the price since then has fallen significantly. These Google Pixel 3a's you could probably find for around $80 to $150 depending on exactly what you're looking for. This one is the XL version, so it's going to cost a little bit more, and I did have to find a very specific model on eBay to make sure that it went ahead and actually worked with what we're going to be doing today. Because I did originally buy this phone on back market and it said it was completely unlocked. They meant carrier unlocked and not OEM unlocked, which is very important. So if you are considering trying this out and running this experiment for yourself, do make sure that the listing you buy this from specifies that it is OEM unlocked. So with that, we are going to go ahead and move into talking about Ubuntu Touch as a project. Ubuntu Touch was announced by Mark Shuttleworth, the current CEO of Canonical, even though he wasn't at the time of announcement, in 2011, where he wrote a blog post talking about how he envisioned Ubuntu as a convergent platform powering smartphones, computers, smart TVs, just about everything. All thanks to Unity, which was announced just a year prior. And he said he expected all of this to happen by Ubuntu 14.04. Ubuntu Touch 1.0 did publish before deadline in Ubuntu 13.10, however only a few phones were supported, such as the Nexus 4. And to address this, Ubuntu launched a fundraiser to create their very own phone, the Ubuntu Edge. The goal for this project was quite ambiguous. It was $32 million in a single month, and there are even some large donations from some big companies such as Bloomberg donating $100,000. 1 month later, $12.7 million was raised, and unfortunately, due to them not actually meeting the goal, all the money was returned. Granted, at the time, it was the most money ever raised on Indiegogo, so that's something interesting. And during the development of Unity 8 Beta, that is when he announced the decision to completely stop funding for the Unity project, as well as the phone and the convergent shell. The project was picked up by the community UB ports. In the same year, they created a foundation to support the project from a legal perspective. And they are very active on this project. The very last Ubuntu Touch OTA is from June, and there's actually going to be some major updates coming in the future that we will be covering on this channel, as they're going to be going from Ubuntu version 16 to some later LTS versions such as 22. The support for Ubuntu Touch devices is growing, with Linux-backed options such as the PinePhone and porting commercial phones, which brings us to this Pixel 3a, which, by the way, the SIM card in this phone is a Mint Mobile SIM card, and they're the ones that have partnered up with us and made this video possible. You've probably seen those funny low-budget commercials with Ryan Reynolds here on YouTube, but let me quickly tell you how awesome their service is. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless coverage for as low as $15 a month, and you do not have to sacrifice coverage, data, or speed. They're built on the same network as T-Mobile, which is what I've been using prior, Absolutely no speed difference between these two phones. And to keep costs low, they sell directly to you online, cutting out retail stores and salespeople. You can keep your same device, you can keep your same phone number, and easily switch services using either eSIM, or if your phone is not compatible with that, they'll go ahead and ship you a SIM card free of charge. Comes in a little card like this, you just pop it out and you're good to go. I went ahead and popped the Mint Mobile SIM card in this Ubuntu Touch phone, and with some very light customization, it was working, including LTE, calls, texts, picture messages, everything. All plans include unlimited talk, text, 5G hotspot, and of course there are family plan options. So stop paying more than you need to on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. Use my link down in the description to get premium wireless starting at $15 a month, or go ahead and head over to mintmobile.com/TechHut. Now here we are on the device. Now this is the lock screen, and before we get too far in opinions and all that, I am just going to show you the general user experience and UI. No calls made today. This is the lock screen, so to unlock, we're just going to go ahead and swipe over. Here I could input my password, or I could go ahead and use the little fingerprint reader on the back. Works very good, very quick. And then this is your home screen. Now with no applications open, you actually get the home screen, but as soon as you start opening things, you're just going to be shuffling back and forth between those applications. Here is our dock with our most frequently used applications on the side, and you could customize this as you see fit. Hit this little Ubuntu button, it's going to open up all of our applications. So for example, if we go ahead and open up a couple of them, let's open up messaging here. And then in this application, if we swipe up, it really doesn't do much except for open up a launcher option here. Now here within messages, for example, if we swipe up like you'd expect on Android to go home, it's not going to do that. In this case, for this application, it's going to go ahead and try to compose a new message. If we swipe over this way, it's going to open up that app launcher, and then we could get into our full launcher this way, or swipe it away. Now to get to our multitasking, we could just go ahead and swipe from this side. And now you can see the only thing open is messages, and I could go in between applications. And if I want to close this out, I would just swipe up, and here we are with nothing open. Looking up here on the top, we have our time, our battery, volume. The L stands for we are getting an LTE connection at the moment. We have our bars, location data, and the green means we have a new notification. If I go ahead and swipe down like you'd expect on most phones, you can see over here we have notifications. I have a new voicemail as well as a new message. If we go over to rotation, we have rotation lock. We have keyboard layout, files right here. So if you're actively downloading or uploading anything, you'll see that there. Under location, you have location detection. You can enable that there. Bluetooth, same deal. Network, we have a lot of options here, including if you want cellular data, Wi-Fi, flight mode, all that. Sound, we have some sound settings. Battery, we have our brightness, so if I bump that up, it's not going to do much. That's one of the kind of hit or miss things. We have our time and date with the calendar and all that, and then last but not least, system. Now one thing, this is a lot of things to be spread out like this to try to go ahead and jump back and forth in between. I do wish there was like a combined menu that was the default swipe down. That maybe included like notifications, brightness, and a couple other things built into one, or at least quick toggles like we see in Android, but this is definitely doing the trick for now. We just go ahead and swipe up to get rid of that, and it will bring up our little thing over here. Now one thing I do need to note, you probably noticed all the menus are dark, and I did that with a customization. If we go over to the UT or Ubuntu Touch tweak tool, that's where I went ahead and did this. And now here you can see we have Unity 8, scaling, usage mode, launcher, and a bunch of different settings. System theme under experimental, you can see I'm using the dark theme. The light theme is usually the default, but I just prefer light themes in general. For the rest of this video, let's go ahead and switch it over to the default theme. Go back, and to actually enable that, we're going to need to reboot our device. So we go over here to System, Shutdown, and restart. So real quick, I'm going to wait for that to finish. And there we go. That's the initial screen that we get since the device is unlocked. And there we go. That's the initial screen we get since the actual bootloader is unlocked. And then we see the Google screen because it's a Pixel phone. And then that takes us to our actual Ubuntu Touch loading screen. And now if I go into an application such as the UT tweak tool, you can see it's all going to be a light theme now. Authenticate that. And this doesn't come on the phone. This is actually from the App Store. So if we go over there and kind of show you what that looks like, it's going to be right here. If we go over here to actually see the name of it, it is the OpenStore. So open up the OpenStore, give it a minute to load up, and here you could see some of the applications. All the applications have a kind of a rating system where it's hearts, smiley face, no heart, and bug. So for example, if we go over to teleports, which I believe this is a Telegram client, You can see lots of hearts, lots of smileys, some bug reports, and some people who don't like it. Like everything else, you get a rundown of what the application is about, some reviews right here with what they rated it, nice changelog, and some more specifics in their GitHub page and all that. Now, in the sake of time, I'm not going to go through absolutely everything that's in here, but you do have things like Deco, which is a email client. We have UNav for navigation. The most loved down here, which is really nice. So we have that tweak tool that I got, Pure Maps, Weber, Document Viewer, a couple other things. There's not a lot of applications, but there are actually a lot of web apps. So if I searched up like YouTube, for example, you could see there's a whole bunch of different YouTube clients, which in turn are just basically web apps. And for example, I do have one. So if I go over to my applications, you can see YouTube there. If I go ahead and open that up, and I am signed in, so if I go over to my channel, you can see it's pretty snappy. The only really like native feature is down here. If I touch this little play button, we got reload, back, home, trending, and just some links to go ahead and quickly get to things. But if I go ahead and play something here, it works really good. And if I go ahead and lower the volume here, you can see all that works. And if I full screen it, give it a rotation, everything's pretty snappy and it doesn't really hold back on you. And of course, to get rid of this, I could just swipe over to multitasking and then swipe up on YouTube, and that will completely close out that application. And now let's go ahead and dive into some of the applications I actually installed on this thing. So for example, well, there's some games. I have Circle Jump on here. One I really like right here is Liner. Now there's not a lot of games, but there is a few to kind of help you pass some time. This one, you just touch the screen to move and you kind of have to avoid obstacles. So let's go up over all the way down and that's how you die. But pretty straightforward game. It's actually pretty fun, and as you go on, the levels do get more challenging. So whoop, and go, and keep going, and we win. So just an example. Now, one thing you probably will be doing quite a bit, since there's not much application availability, is browsing the web. So this is their web browser. I'm just going to show you real quick kind of the responsiveness and all that. Let's go ahead and Google TechHut, and this should give us the option to go to the main TechHut website. So if we open that up, give it a second just to load. There we go, I had to tap on it a little harder. This is our website, and if I open up our latest newsletter, I do recommend you go subscribe to it. Lots of news every week for the most part, and you can see it's very responsive. Go ahead and scroll. There's not much stutter, not much lag. We can zoom in, zoom out. Overall, it's really no issue at all. Nothing worse than you'd expect on a normal browser on like an Android or even an iPhone. And like, let's go ahead and select this text here, copy, and all that works perfectly fine. If we go hold down over here, there's not a select all option, which kind of sucks, but we could go ahead and paste and we're good to go. Now, additionally, speaking of web and web apps, I do have a couple other ones on here other than YouTube. For example, Twitter here is one that I've been using off and on quite a bit, and it tends to work fairly well. So here we are, going to give it just a minute to load. And again, it's not as responsive as like a native Android application, but it will definitely do the trick. So if we go over to notifications here, it takes a sec just to load up and we can kind of see what's going on. Now let's check out some of the actual real non-web app applications. For example, Podbird. This is a really nice podcast application. If you listen to podcasts on your phone, this is probably going to be your best friend. You can see I have a lot of Destination Linux, would recommend, and then some news stuff. And if we go over here under downloads, you can see I was using it a couple weeks ago for that stuff. But if I go ahead and play one, for example.
Welcome to episode number 302 of Destination Linux. Destination Linux is a video podcast from the Text Digital Network. If you're new to the show, Destination Linux is a podcast perfect.
I think it's a mistake. Google Plus or Google Circles or what?
It just overall works really good. At least in my experience, all the applications that have good ratings and all that really are definitely worth using. For example, weather here, everybody needs a good old weather application. You could see how it looks, works. Overall, it's really nice, gives you a lot of data, a lot of information. I get really specific data on exactly what is going on certain days. Just overall, the entire experience of using this phone has been awesome. Now, with that, there are some cons. I did mention initially that I do wish that these were a little more linked together instead of having all these different options across the what would be the notification panel. Additionally, the one thing that isn't working is right over here under location. It says it's working. I've gotten it to work one time for like a minute, and that is about it. One of the high-rated applications is right here, Pure Maps. Now the application itself is great, but I've just not been able to get proper location data. So if I go ahead search, or let's do a directions, you can see from current position, and it's just going to be loading like that for just about ever. The one time I did get it to work, I kept it on this screen for about 10 minutes. It eventually connected, and then about a minute later it disconnected. So not very good for turn-by-turn directions, but you can still use this application as like a MapQuest-like system. You can see how responsive it is. I mean, it's a good application. Zooming in here, it loads data really fast. It's good, but it would be oh so much better if the turn-by-turn directions and all that would be able to work. No matter what SIM card I have on this, whether if it's T-Mobile, Mint Mobile, whatever, it tends to like to disconnect and reconnect to the internet. It always starts off with 2G and then eventually connects to LTE. So that is just kind of annoying if you're actively browsing the web and it decides to drop connection and reconnect. It takes it much longer than it should. And again, that's the fault of the operating system and not the service providers. But if we go over here, we can wait. A lot of the times if I go into flight mode and make it rethink about it and then disable that, a lot of times this will rapidly fix the issue. But other than that, there's really not much going wrong or bad with this phone. It's very usable for just normal day-to-day calling, texting, looking up something on Google real quick. You can see all the various settings here. We have VPN, we have the customization settings for background sounds, etc., notifications, some system stuff including updates, and we could go to About and see some really specific information about this phone. It's the Pixel 3a and all of that. Now, one thing that's really nice about this phone is the camera. The camera on the phone itself is really good, but I have not experienced any significant issues when it comes to actually using this camera. So for example, I'm going to zoom into that little mini PC I just recorded a video on. It should be up. You should go check it out. Snap a picture and good to go. Now if I switch over to video, for example, I can also start recording a video, and right now what you're hearing is my audio behind the video, and it's pretty good. If we zoom in while we're recording, of course it's going to get a little distorted, not the best, but for an open source Linux phone, this quality is pretty good. And then from there, if we open up the gallery application, we can see some of what we've done. So if I open up this picture, zoom in, you can see it's pretty good. It's a little washed out, but I do have a lot of lights on at the moment. If I go back and go to that video, and if I hit play, it's going to open up the media player application and then play the video. Overall, really good, very responsive, and I can just go boom boom to get rid of those applications. So overall, there's definitely a few cons, but using this thing has been an absolute pleasure. So with all that, is this phone usable as a daily driver? I do have to say, yes, you are going to be giving up a little bit though. The problem is having both of these phones available to me at this desk here, for example, I would find myself reaching for the Android one to do things like posting a tweet or something like that. But when I went ahead and took this one out and about, it did a lot of the basic things that I needed it to do. But of course, going from something like an Android phone to this is a little difficult if you're just used to the availability of applications, the speed, the responsiveness. If you do a lot of work from an Android or even an iPhone, you might struggle using this day to day. But I think probably one of the very best use cases for something like this is if you're looking to not use your phone as much. There's kind of a trend of people who are switching over to these dumb phones or really debloating their phone and stripping features from it in order to be staring at the screen less. And that's really a good thing. It's good for your mental health. There's a lot of positive aspects when doing that. Now, the difference between using a dumb phone and something like a Linux phone that actually works somewhat decent is you actually do have more tools and things available to you. And if you're somebody who's looking to get away from the Google ecosystem altogether and still have apps and some of that functionality that you would expect out of a smartphone today, this is really a good option. I do a lot of the work I do from my phone, and unfortunately, this is just not quite there yet for me. As currently in my life, I'm a little too mobile not to have all the applications and everything that I use day to day. But if I needed to, could I switch to using Ubuntu Touch on this Pixel? Yeah. One suggestion I could make if you do want to try to switch to this is keep your current phone, get a cheap used Pixel just like I did, use both at the same time for a little while, and then occasionally go ahead and leave your old phone home and see how well you do with this one. Again, the big con, at least that I've noticed, granted it technically is supposed to work, is GPS just does not update quick enough, so I can't really use this for mapping or like real-time direction. You can use it kind of as like a MapQuest-like system, but that's not going to cut it for me, unfortunately. And of course, things are updating all the time, so I will definitely be taking a look at this again when some of those big updates come up in the future. And with all that, I do hope you enjoyed this video. I do hope you have an absolutely beautiful day. Anything I mentioned will be linked down below. And goodbye.